Welcome back to Inside USA. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most transformative periods in American history. We'll explore the powerful and emotional story of what the US military truly did during World War II. A global conflict that didn't just reshape nations, but changed America forever. When war first erupted in Europe in 1939, the United States was watching from the sidelines. America was unprepared for a conflict of this scale. Its military was small, its equipment outdated, and the nation was still reeling from the Great Depression. The focus was on recovery at home, not conflict abroad. But everything changed on a day that would live in infamy. December 7th, 1941. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by the Empire of Japan was a brutal wake-up call. It was a moment that ignited a fire across the nation, uniting Americans with a shared purpose and turning ordinary citizens into soldiers and factories into engines of war. The transformation was astonishing. In just a matter of months, America began building one of the greatest military forces in history. The industrial might of the nation was fully unleashed. Factories that once built cars were now churning out tanks and planes. Shipyards worked around the clock, producing warships at a record-breaking speed, and millions of Americans from every walk of life answered the call to serve. The sleeping giant had awakened. The US military faced its first real test in the harsh deserts of North Africa. Fighting against the experienced and battle-hardened German forces, American troops learned painful lessons. Early defeats were tough, but they were also crucial learning experiences. The military adapted, improved its tactics, and ultimately secured vital victories. This hard-won success in North Africa boosted confidence and prepared the American forces for the long and difficult road ahead. Next came the Italian campaign. This was a brutal, grinding fight through mountains, mud, and freezing weather. Facing fierce German resistance every step of the way, American soldiers were tested to their absolute limits. The campaign in Italy was a testament to endurance and sheer willpower. As Allied forces slowly pushed their way up the Italian peninsula, one hard-fought mile at a time. It was a costly and exhausting chapter of the war, but it was essential in weakening the Axis grip on Europe. Then came the moment that would define the war in Europe. D-Day. June 6th, 1944. This was the largest seaborne invasion ever launched in human history. Under a sky filled with aircraft, and on a sea crowded with ships, American troops stormed the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy. At Omaha and Utah Beach, they faced a storm of deadly machine gun fire and artillery. The courage and sacrifice displayed on those shores were almost unimaginable. D-Day was the turning point. It breached Hitler's Atlantic Wall, opened the road to freedom, and began the final liberation of Europe from Nazi control. But victory was not immediate. In the winter of 1944, Hitler launched a final, desperate offensive in the Ardennes Forest, known as the Battle of the Bulge. American soldiers, caught by surprise in the freezing snow-covered forests, were pushed to their limits in one of the toughest battles of the war. Their courage and unity held the line. They refused to break. This incredible resilience stopped Germany's last major attack and sealed the fate of the Nazi regime. By early 1945, American forces were pushing deep into Germany. They crossed the Rhine River, liberating cities and towns that had been under Nazi rule for years. And as they advanced, they uncovered the unimaginable horrors of the concentration camps, bearing witness to the very evil they had been fighting to destroy. Finally, on May 8th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Victory in Europe was declared, and the continent celebrated its hard-won freedom. But the war wasn't over. Across the vast Pacific Ocean, American forces were engaged in a different, but equally brutal, kind of warfare. The island-hopping campaign against Japan was a series of bloody and relentless battles, from the strategic naval victory at Midway, which turned the tide of the war in the Pacific, to the grueling jungle warfare on Guadalcanal. The fighting was savage. Battles on islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa became legendary for their intensity and the incredible sacrifice of the US Marines and soldiers who fought there. Inch by inch, island by island, American determination, sacrifice, and strategy slowly pushed Japan back towards its home islands. The war in the Pacific finally came to an end in August 1945, after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki led to Japan's surrender. From a small, struggling force, to a global superpower. The journey of the American military through World War II is a story of incredible transformation. It's a legacy of resilience, innovation, and an unshakable resolve that not only secured victory but also shaped the modern world and defined the values of freedom and unity for generations to come. But the story doesn't end there. After the cheers of victory faded, the United States found itself in a world transformed. America was now a global superpower, but this new status brought a new, far more complex challenge. The rise of the Soviet Union and the beginning of the Cold War. This was a silent, tense, and incredibly dangerous conflict that would reshape the American military all over again. The US quickly realized that the strategies of World War II were no longer enough. This new conflict wouldn't be fought with massive armies on traditional battlefields. It would be a war of ideology, intelligence, and technology. This realization led to the creation of powerful new agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, tasked with gathering intelligence around the globe. The Air Force became its own independent branch, a clear sign that air power and long-range capabilities were now central to national defense. And most critically, this era saw the birth of nuclear deterrence, as America developed atomic weapons capable of reaching across continents, creating a terrifying new balance of power. The very nature of being a soldier changed. They were trained for a different kind of war, one fought through espionage, proxy conflicts, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. To counter Soviet expansion in Europe, the United States formed NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance that remains a cornerstone of global security today. American troops were stationed across Western Europe, and a vast network of radar stations, missile silos, and early warning systems was built around the world to watch for any sign of a Soviet attack. The American military raced into the jet age. Advanced aircraft like the F-86 Sabre dominated the skies in the Korean War. And later, legendary planes like the SR-71 Blackbird pushed the boundaries of speed and stealth, flying missions deep into hostile territory. Beneath the waves, a new silent service emerged. Nuclear-powered submarines, armed with ballistic missiles, patrolled the oceans, providing a second strike capability that ensured mutually assured destruction, the grim reality that a nuclear war could have no winner. The Cold War wasn't just cold. It had moments that were dangerously hot. Proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam tested American military strategy and resolve. Costing hundreds of thousands of lives, the world held its breath during moments of extreme tension. Like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the US and the Soviet Union came to the very brink of nuclear war. A single miscalculation could have destroyed nations. This constant state of high alert drove incredible technological advancement. The Cold War pushed the United States to lead breakthroughs in satellites, which gave us eyes in the sky. The space race was not just about national pride. It was about achieving strategic superiority. This era gave us stealth technology, making aircraft nearly invisible to radar. And it created the global communication systems that now connect our world and are still essential to modern warfare. From the high-stakes standoff at the Berlin Wall to its eventual fall in 1989, the American military had to adapt constantly. It moved from a focus on conventional warfare to a new model driven by intelligence, high-tech weaponry, and a global presence. By the time the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, ending the Cold War, the United States had become more than just a military superpower. It was the principal architect of the modern world order. Here on Inside USA, this chapter of American history reveals how a war that was never openly fought changed everything about America's strength, its strategy, and its identity. The legacy of this period is the military we know today, a force forged in the fires of a global hot war and tempered in the long, tense decades of the Cold War. Thank you for joining us on this journey through America's past. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode of Inside USA.